There are places you're never meant to go, journeys you were never supposed to take. But what happens when you do, and there's no way back? Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some games should never be played. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and those who step into the unknown rarely return the same, if they return at all. Tonight, we bring you two terrifying tales of people who crossed those boundaries. One boarded a train that wasn't supposed to exist, a train that moves through places no living person should ever see. The other, a group of friends who played a simple game in the dark, only to discover they weren't playing alone. Two stories, two warnings, and one terrifying truth that binds them together. If you dare to uncover what lies ahead, keep watching. But be warned, some doors, once open, can never be closed. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, would you board the midnight train? Would you dare play the blackout game? Or would you walk away while you still can? Now, let's begin. Michael stood alone on the platform, his breath curling in the frigid air as a dense fog crept along the ground, swallowing the space around him. The train station was dead silent. No distant chatter, no hum of city life, not even the rustling of leaves or the distant howl of wind. It was as if the world itself had gone still, waiting. The clock overhead was frozen at 12 a.m., its second hand twitching but never moving forward. The old wooden benches were empty, dust-coated as though no one had sat there in years. The flickering station lights cast a sickly yellow glow over cracked tiles, their dim radiance barely cutting through the fog. Something felt wrong. Michael glanced around, expecting to see another traveler, a station attendant, anyone. But he was alone. He checked his phone, no signal, no notifications, no time change. The screen wouldn't even turn off. Then a sound, a distant, mournful whistle. His pulse spiked. The ground trembled beneath his feet, subtle at first, then stronger, as if something massive was approaching. But there were no tracks ahead of him, just an abyss of fog stretching endlessly into the night. And yet, the train appeared. Not from the distance, not from another station. One moment, there was nothing. The next, a colossal locomotive materialized from the mist, its steel frame gleaming under the dim station lights. It moved without sound, gliding to a halt as if the very air carried it forward. Its windows were black, not tinted, not shadowed, just empty voids. A wave of icy air rolled over Michael as the train settled. The platform seemed smaller now, like the space around him had shrunk, forcing him closer to the waiting doors. The air weighed on him, thick and suffocating, pressing against his chest like unseen hands. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, to leave, to run. But his legs wouldn't move. The doors slid open, without a sound. No conductor, no announcement, just an entrance into a place that should not exist. A voice in the back of his mind whispered a single word: go! And against every instinct, every shred of reason left in him, Michael stepped inside. The doors slid open without a sound, and the moment Michael stepped inside, the temperature plummeted. The air inside the train was thick, wrong, pressing against his skin like unseen hands, suffocating yet weightless at the same time. The carriage was old-fashioned, almost out of time, the kind of train you'd see in a faded black and white photograph. The walls were lined with dark wood paneling, the seats upholstered in deep green velvet, their edges frayed and thinning. Overhead lamps cast a dim, flickering glow, their light too weak to reach the ends of the carriage. The air smelled faintly of something burnt. Not fire, but something else. Something older. Michael turned his head, expecting to see other passengers, and he did. Rows of figures sat perfectly still, their faces pale, their postures rigid. Their clothing didn't match, as if they were from different places, different eras. Some wore modern clothes, others dressed as if they belonged to another century. A man in a gray suit sat slumped forward, his eyes locked on the floor. A woman in a faded dress clutched a lace handkerchief, her lips barely moving, as if whispering to someone who wasn't there. Further down, a child sat with his legs dangling over the edge of his seat, his back straight, his head bowed so low that his chin pressed against his chest. None of them moved. None of them breathed. A sharp chill ran down Michael's spine. He swallowed, the sound too loud in the stifling silence. The train let out a low, groaning creak as if settling into motion, though the scenery outside remained an abyss of blackness. As Michael hesitated in the aisle, the whispers began. Soft, muted, like echoes from another time. Some were frantic, others mournful, all unsettling. A man in the second row cradled a burnt photograph in his shaking hands, his lips parting with ragged, breathless murmurs. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." His fingers trembled as he traced the edges of the charred image, his breathing uneven, his body rocking slightly like he was trapped in an unbreakable loop of regret. Michael's throat tightened. He took a slow, cautious step forward. The train groaned again. The whispers grew louder. A woman a few rows down sat hunched forward, her hands clutching the air as if holding something only she could see. Her breath hitched as silent sobs racked her body, and though her eyes remained dry, her agony was unmistakable. "Please, please wake up. Please don't be gone." The weight of her grief made Michael's stomach turn, his skin crawling with the unbearable feeling that he was intruding on something he shouldn't be witnessing. Michael took another step. He passed an empty seat, but it wasn't empty. The seatbelt was fastened. The cushion was indented, as if someone was sitting there. But there was no one. His breath hitched, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He leaned in slightly, his instincts screaming at him to leave it alone. The indent shifted, the belt tightened, like something unseen was aware of him. Michael's fingers curled into a tight fist. The cold gnawed at his skin, deeper now, settling into his bones. This wasn't just a train, it was a graveyard, a vessel for the lost, for those who had never made it home. His legs screamed at him to turn back, to run, to throw himself at the doors and pry them open. But then the train jerked forward. It was moving, and there was no getting off now. The train jolted forward, its ancient wheels grinding against unseen tracks, the sound reverberating through the hollow carriage like a groan from something long dead. Michael stumbled, gripping the back of a seat to steady himself, his breath coming in short, panicked bursts. The windows, once clouded with dust and streaked with grime, suddenly cleared, revealing the world outside. But it wasn't the world he knew. The train wasn't moving through a city. It wasn't rolling through countryside or small towns. There were no buildings, no streets, no landmarks of any kind. There was only nothing. At first, it was just an endless abyss, a void of swirling fog that stretched infinitely in all directions. But as the train picked up speed, the fog began to shift, parting like curtains, revealing glimpses of something worse. Michael's hands tightened around the seat. What the hell was he looking at? The landscapes outside weren't natural. They were wrong, broken, twisted. A skeletal cityscape rose from the darkness. Skyscrapers tilted at impossible angles, their windows shattered, their insides exposed like rotting carcasses. The roads beneath them led nowhere, curving unnaturally, looping back into themselves like a maze designed to trap anyone foolish enough to step inside. Streetlights flickered, casting distorted shadows that didn't match their surroundings. In the distance, a bridge stretched over a black river, but the water wasn't moving. It wasn't even liquid. It was thick and pulsating, like something was alive beneath its surface. And then there were the figures. Michael's stomach twisted as he saw them. Tall, motionless silhouettes standing in clusters, their hollow eyes staring directly at the train. They weren't people. They weren't even shadows. They were something else. Their bodies flickered, warping between solid and transparent, their heads tilting slightly as if listening to something only they could hear. Some had elongated limbs, their fingers stretching unnaturally toward the train as it passed. Others had no faces at all, just blank, featureless voids where eyes and mouths should have been. A violent shudder racked the train, And suddenly the whispers returned. But this time they weren't just background noise. They were visions. Michael's head snapped toward the nearest window as the scenery outside changed again. He saw flashes, glimpses of moments frozen in time. A man standing on the edge of a rooftop, the wind whipping through his clothes. His body was rigid, his hands shaking as he looked down at the city below. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Then he jumped. Michael flinched as the vision cut out like a broken film reel. Another flicker. A woman struggling in dark water, her arms flailing, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The river swallowed her whole, her body vanishing beneath the surface, leaving only the ripples behind. Another flicker. A child wandering through a fog-covered forest, his small hands reaching out, touching trees that dissolved into the mist as soon as he made contact. His footsteps made no sound. His shadow stretched unnaturally behind him, like something else was following him. The child turned suddenly, his wide, tear-streaked eyes locking onto Michael through the window, as if he could see him. Then the fog swallowed him whole. Michael's breath hitched, his heartbeat slammed against his ribs. These weren't just random tragedies. These were the passengers. His head snapped toward the man with the burnt photograph, still clutching it to his chest, whispering his broken apologies. The woman in the faded dress still wept over the empty space in her arms. The empty seat with the fastened seatbelt hadn't changed, but Michael had the horrific realization that whoever had been sitting there was still there, just unseen. The train lurched violently. Michael stumbled forward, gripping a metal pole, his pulse racing. His mind screamed for escape. He spun toward the doors, his fingers clawing at the cold metal handle. Locked. His breathing grew ragged as he moved to the next carriage door, yanking at it, pounding his fists against the glass. Nothing. His own reflection stared back at him, but something was off. His face was too pale. His eyes were too hollow. Then, in the reflection, a shadow moved behind him. Michael whirled around. Nothing was there, but the air behind him felt different. He could feel something there, standing just beyond his line of sight, watching. The whispers turned to screams, not loud, not external. Inside his head, he clamped his hands over his ears, his knees buckling, his lungs struggling for air. The train kept moving, faster now, faster now. The distorted landscapes outside flashing by in broken, disjointed images. The silhouettes in the fog turned their heads in unison, their empty faces fixated on him. Michael squeezed his eyes shut. Wake up, wake up, wake up. But this wasn't a dream. The train was going somewhere, and he was part of it now. The train groaned as it began to slow, the grinding of its unseen wheels reverberating through the hollow metal of the carriage. Michael clutched the nearest seat, his breath uneven, his knuckles white as he braced for the stop. But when he looked outside, expecting to see a station, a platform, something, there was only blackness. Not night, not fog, just an endless void stretching in every direction, swallowing the light, swallowing the train, swallowing everything. It wasn't empty, it was worse than empty. It was something vast, waiting. The lights inside the train flickered. The whispers had stopped. The passengers sat motionless, their faces locked in the same lifeless expressions, as if they had known this stop was coming, as if they had always known. Michael's stomach turned to ice. He looked toward the doors. They didn't open, not yet, but something was shifting. He turned, hoping for some kind of sign, some kind of logic to what was happening. And then, on the wall near the conductor's booth, he saw it, a passenger list. The old yellowed paper had names printed in delicate, inked script, names of the damned. Michael stepped forward slowly, his breath catching in his throat as he scanned the list, moving past names that meant nothing to him, people he had never met, names that blurred as if time had tried to erase them, until he saw his own, his full name printed in perfect, unfamiliar handwriting. Next to it, a date. Michael's knees went weak. The date was today. A cold, sickening wave of realization crashed over him. His name, his presence, wasn't an accident. He hadn't just stumbled onto this train. He had been meant to board. His pulse pounded. His chest tightened. "No!" His voice cracked as he backed away from the list, as if rejecting the reality before him could somehow undo it. His mind screamed for escape. He turned, launching himself at the nearest door, pounding his fists against it, yanking at the handle. It didn't budge. He clawed at the window, his breath fogging up the glass. Outside, the darkness breathed. Then the train shuddered. The doors let out a low hiss, and they opened. A gust of cold air flooded the carriage, thick with the scent of something ancient, something decayed. The air felt heavy, as if something had stepped inside, even though nothing was there. The passengers remained still, as though they were waiting. Michael's heart slammed against his ribs as he took a shaky step back. He felt it before he saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the train. It was him. Michael's body locked in place, his mind rejecting what his eyes were seeing. The figure standing at the entrance of the train, the last passenger, had his face, his build, his exact movements. But the eyes were wrong, empty, devoid of light. Michael gasped, stepping away, but the figure stepped forward. "No!" he whispered. "No! This isn't real!" The train shuddered again and the overhead lights flickered. The passengers finally moved, their heads tilting toward him, their mouths stretching into something between a grin and a grimace. Michael's reflection stepped forward, the space around it warping, bending, distorting. And then he remembered. A flood of images, memories that weren't his, yet they were. The same station, the same fog, the same choice to step aboard. But this had already happened. Michael had boarded this train before, and he had never left. The truth crashed over him, his vision spinning, his breath caught in his throat. He wasn't just a passenger, he was a replacement. The train needed someone to take his place. That was how it worked. That was why the last passenger always left. Michael's own body felt heavy, unfamiliar. The train creaked, the doors still open, waiting for him to understand, waiting for him to leave. And his replacement, his new self, was waiting to take his seat. Michael's scream never left his throat. The last thing he saw before the doors slammed shut was himself, taking his place among the damned. The train doors slammed shut. Michael was gone. The passengers sat in eerie silence, their vacant eyes staring ahead, the train resuming its endless, cursed journey. And just like that, it was as if he had never existed. But elsewhere, far from the spectral tracks and the void beyond, another story was unfolding. A new group of people, a different night, but the same fate waiting to claim another. Some doors are meant to stay closed, some games should never be played. But when the midnight train fades into the distance, another nightmare begins. Before we continue, if you're still watching, consider this your warning. If you think you could have escaped the train, or if you believe you would have made a different choice, tell us in the comments. Like and subscribe if you dare, because the next game we're about to play is far worse. 5 friends sat in a dimly lit basement, the air thick with the scent of old wood and dust. The only source of light was a single candle flickering in the center of the room. Shadows danced across the walls as laughter and hushed voices filled the space. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of something rotting. Not strong, not overwhelming, but just enough to notice. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the small basement window. A thin, eerie whistle sneaking through the cracks. They had been talking about urban legends for nearly an hour now, their voices growing quieter, their laughter turning more hesitant as the stories got darker. At first, it had been fun, tales of haunted houses, cryptic internet threads, and urban myths they had all heard before. But as the candle burned lower, their words carried more weight, the line between fiction and reality beginning to blur. Eric leaned forward, his eyes gleaming in the candlelight. "Okay, but have you guys heard about the midnight train?" His voice dropped just enough to make the others lean in. "They say it just appears. No tracks, no station, no warning, and if you board it, you don't come back." Jenna let out a short laugh, but it was forced, too sharp. Yeah, right. Sounds like one of those creepy Reddit stories. Eric didn't break his stare. Look it up. It's not just a story. It's been around for decades in different places, different names. People disappear. No reports, no records. Just gone. A moment of hesitation passed through the group. Tyler shifted, rubbing his arms. The room felt colder. Yeah, I've read about it too. He exhaled, shaking his head. It's weird. Some say it's a cursed train. Others say it's a limbo for the dead. But the freakiest part? There's always an empty seat, waiting for the next person. Kayla rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. Come on, you guys don't actually believe that. Why not? Eric grinned. Stranger things have happened. The candle flickered violently, as if reacting to his words. Alex, who had been quiet for most of the conversation, finally spoke. His tone was skeptical, but his fingers tapped anxiously against his knee. So what? We're just supposed to believe in some ghost train that kidnaps people? Eric shrugged. You don't have to believe it. But if you did, if you really thought it was real, would you ever get on? No one answered. The wind howled against the basement window, the sound sharp and almost human. Then Eric leaned back against the wall, tilting his head slightly. You want something real? Let's try something we can prove. The shift in conversation was immediate. Jenna raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Eric's grin widened. Have you guys ever played the Blackout Game? The candle flickered again. A murmur of unease passed through the group. Jenna scoffed, but there was something else in her voice now. A hesitation. Sounds like something middle schoolers made up. You'd think that, Eric said. But the rules are everywhere. Different versions, sure, but the core game? It's real. Tyler's face darkened slightly. You mean the one where you sit in total darkness and ask if something's there? Eric nodded slowly. You turn off all the lights. You sit in a circle. One by one, you say, "Are you here with us?" If there's no answer, the game ends. But if something answers, you have to keep playing. Jenna shivered for real this time. Wow, terrifying. Kayla frowned. And if you stop playing? Eric's grin widened. Then it keeps playing with you. The words hung in the air like a thick fog, unshakable. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the basement window harder this time. Alex exhaled, rolling his shoulders. This is dumb. Then let's prove it, Eric said, reaching for the candle. His fingers hovered over the flame, waiting. Jenna let out a small laugh, but it was strained. You're serious? Eric's eyes gleamed. Come on, it's just a game. The candlelight flickered one last time, and that was their first mistake. The basement felt different now, heavier, as if the walls had tightened, pressing in on them, absorbing their words and swallowing any sense of safety. The candle sat between them, its weak flame flickering erratically, casting long, jagged shadows that stretched and curled along the walls like grasping fingers. The old wooden beams groaned overhead, the faint hum of wind seeping through the cracks in the foundation. No one spoke for a moment, their unspoken hesitations thick in the air. Eric rolled his shoulders, exhaling. All right, you know the rules. His voice had lost its playful edge, settling into something steadier, more deliberate. He reached forward and pinched the candle's flame between his fingers, snuffing it out. The darkness was immediate. It wasn't just dark, it was absolute, a suffocating void. No shifting lights from outside, no glow from their phones, just nothing. Kayla sucked in a breath. This is stupid, she muttered, but her voice sounded small now, swallowed by the thick blackness surrounding them. Eric ignored her. Rule number 1, he said, everyone must sit in complete darkness. Rule number 2, Eric continued, each person must say, are you here with us? The silence stretched long and uncomfortable. The darkness made everything worse. It was impossible to tell where the others were. They could have been inches apart or miles away. Eric cleared his throat. I'll go first. The group tensed. His voice came soft, low. Are you here with us? Nothing. No movement. No whispers. just the dull roar of silence pressing in. A long moment passed, then Jenna exhaled. "Thank God," she muttered. Eric chuckled, but there was something forced in it. "Relax, that was just the first round. Kayla, you're up." Kayla sucked in a breath. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, but after a pause, she spoke the words. "Are you here with us?" Another pause, another stretch of endless silence. The air felt colder. "See?" Jenna said, shifting slightly on the floor. "Told you it's just a soft creak." They all froze. It had come from the far side of the room, near the stairs. Tyler exhaled sharply. "The house is old," he said, but his voice was thinner now, weaker. "It's just settling." Eric didn't answer. "Alex, your turn," he said instead. Alex's breath was uneven. He swallowed hard before muttering, "Are you here with us?" A few seconds passed. Nothing. Nothing. Then Jenna, "Are you here with us?" Silence. One by one, they spoke the words, waiting, listening. Eric was last. His voice didn't waver. "Are you here with us?" Nothing. The silence stretched on. The air was wrong now, thicker. The darkness felt heavier, like it was listening. Jenna let out a breath. "Okay, game's over." Kayla shifted. "Turn the light back on." Eric didn't move. "Eric," Jenna pressed. "We're done." Still, he didn't move. Something about the silence had changed. The basement felt bigger, like the five of them weren't the only ones sitting in that circle anymore. Jenna exhaled sharply. "Eric," she muttered, irritation laced in her voice. "Turn the damn light back on." No response. Kayla shifted beside her, the sound of fabric brushing against the dusty floor. "Come on," she added, her voice softer now, less annoyed, more uncertain. Still nothing. The silence was different now. Before, it had been empty, an absence of sound, a void between their words. But now it felt full, heavy, like something was breathing in the dark, just out of reach. Tyler cleared his throat. "Dude, quit messing around." Still, Eric didn't move. And then, tap, tap, a soft sound from inside the room. Jenna's entire body tensed. It had been faint, but too deliberate to be the house settling. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like fingers against wood. Alex sucked in a breath beside her. Did someone just move?" Alex swallowed, his hands pressing into his knees. His mind scrambled for logic, an explanation, anything that didn't involve what they all felt creeping into the room with them. No one moved, no one breathed. And then, a voice. Soft, ragged, too close. "Yes." Jenna jerked backwards so fast she nearly knocked over Tyler. Her pulse thundered in her ears. That hadn't been any of them. The voice had come from inside the circle. Tyler felt his throat tighten. His fingers dug into the floor. "Eric," he whispered, barely able to form the words. "Tell me that was you." Silence. Then, "I didn't say anything." It was Eric's voice this time. It came from the far side of the circle, the opposite side of where the voice had just spoken. Jenna's breath shuddered. "Someone turn on the fucking light." Alex fumbled in the dark, his hands scrambling for his phone. A sharp clatter, his fingers knocked it over. The silence stretched, the air turned ice cold, and then, shuffling. A slow, deliberate movement. Something was moving between them. Michael's body locked up, his fingers twitched, his lungs screamed for air, but he barely dared to breathe. He could feel it, the presence that was no longer just watching. It was here. Something exhaled, slow and measured, right beside him. He felt it against his skin. His stomach turned, his chest tightening, as a wave of nausea rolled through him. Kayla whimpered. "I don't—" A sudden rush of movement. Something brushed against her. She screamed. Tyler scrambled backward, slamming against the wall. "Jesus Christ! Who the hell just moved?" Jenna's hands flew out in the dark, searching for someone, anyone. "Kayla! Where are you?" But Kayla's breathing had changed. It wasn't hers anymore. It was too deep, too slow, and it was coming from somewhere else. Something had answered them. And now, it wasn't leaving. Alex's shaking fingers finally found his phone. He swiped at the screen, desperate for even the faintest glow. The second the flashlight flared to life, the screaming started. Kayla was gone. Her spot on the floor was empty. No sign of her, no sound, just absence. Jenna's breath hitched. Where the hell is she? Her voice cracked as her eyes darted around the basement, searching the dimly lit corners for any trace of movement. Tyler scrambled to his feet, his hands shaking. Kayla, say something! Then a noise, a sharp, wet inhale, not from Kayla, from everywhere. The air twisted, the basement shifted, the shadows grew longer, stretching unnaturally across the floor as if something was breathing them into existence. The candle, still sitting in the center, flickered wildly, though no wind touched it. Eric grabbed Alex's arm, his voice low, urgent. Turn that light off, now! Alex hesitated. What? We need to... Bang! Something slammed against the basement door. Hard. Everyone jumped, their bodies snapping toward the sound. The door shuddered on its hinges, the wood groaning like it was straining against something huge pressing against it from the other side. Jenna's breath came out in short, ragged bursts. We have to get out of here. She bolted toward the stairs, reaching for the handle, but it wouldn't move. It was locked, not stuck, locked. Tyler ran up behind her, yanking the knob with both hands. Help me! He braced his foot against the wall and pulled harder, his muscles straining. Nothing. It was like the door wasn't just jammed, it was sealed shut. And then, the voices started. Not one, several, all at once. Some were whispering, others were crying, some were laughing. One of them was saying their names. Jenna, Tyler, Eric, Alex. Jenna's stomach twisted. The sound wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the room. Alex killed the flashlight. The room was plunged back into darkness. The voices kept going. Too many voices. Some were gasping like they were drowning. Others were choking on sobs. And then, layered over all of it, one familiar voice, soft, broken. Help me, Kayla. Jenna turned toward the sound, her chest tightening. Kayla, where are you? Then, a laugh. Not Kayla's, a mocking, wet giggle, rising from the dark like something watching from just beyond the light. Then the voice, Kayla's voice, changed, distorted, garbled. You shouldn't have played! Something moved, low to the ground, too fast. Alex's hands fumbled in the dark, his fingers shaking as he gripped his phone. He pressed the power button. The flashlight flared back to life, casting its cold, sterile glow across the basement. The room was empty. Kayla was gone. Jenna's breath came out in short, choked gasps. She turned frantically, scanning every inch of the basement. The shadows along the walls weren't moving anymore. They were just shadows. The air was still. The suffocating presence from before had vanished. But Kayla wasn't there. Where is she? Tyler whispered, his voice barely audible. She was right here. Eric swallowed hard, his face pale. We need to get out of here. Now! Jenna spun toward the door and froze. The wall had changed. Her stomach lurched. Her throat went dry. The bricks weren't bare anymore. Words had appeared, written in something dark, thick, and dripping. Alex's flashlight beam trembled as he aimed it toward the letters. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows across the message. A new set of rules. 1, the game never ends. 2, do not turn on the light. 3, do not speak out of turn. 4, do not try to leave. 5, a new player must be chosen. Jenna staggered backward, her pulse hammering against her ribs. This wasn't here before. Tyler took a shaking step forward, his breath shallow. We broke the rules. Eric's voice was hollow. And now we're playing for real. Alex's phone buzzed violently in his hand, the sudden vibration making him flinch. A notification. He wasn't the only one. Jenna's phone, Tyler's phone, Eric's phone. They all buzzed at the same time. Slowly, as if terrified of what they would see, they looked down. A single message. Now you belong to the game. Another buzz. A second message appeared. Welcome to the next round. The basement went dark. The darkness swallowed them whole. No more voices, no more whispers. Just the heavy, suffocating weight of something unseen, something waiting. Somewhere deep in the void, a train rumbled forward. Huintour, carrying passengers who could never leave. Somewhere else, a game continued, one that never truly ended. Michael had stepped onto a train that wasn't meant for the living. His fate was sealed the moment the doors closed. The midnight train didn't take him somewhere. It took him away. A new passenger had boarded in his place, and the train would keep moving, always waiting for the next lost soul. Kayla had spoken out of turn, broken the rules of a game she never should have played. Now she was gone, erased from reality, pulled into something far older, far darker than a simple ritual. But the game wasn't over. The rules had changed. A new round had begun, and it needed new players. Some journeys never end, some games never stop, and maybe, just maybe, you're already playing. You might wake up one night to the sound of a distant train whistle, though there are no tracks nearby. Or maybe you'll get a message on your phone, one you don't remember downloading, an invitation, a warning, a call to play. What would you do? Would you board the train? Would you ask, "Are you here with us?" Or would you run before it's too late? Tell me in the comments below. Would you survive either of these nightmares? What would be your escape plan? Let's see who makes it out alive. And if you're still here, still watching, still listening, you've already taken the first step. This is Haunt, Fear, Horror. Like, subscribe, share your thoughts, and whatever you do, don't play in the dark. Don't play in the dark.